Hello, welcome back. This is KP. Are Singaporeans selfish? That's the title of today's video. Are Singaporeans selfish? And this idea of the tragedy of the commons. So we'll try to explore maybe several pieces of news to see whether we are a selfish bunch of people, or are we capable of seeing beyond our own interests and consider other people? So I have some news to share with you. First of all, let's have a look at this piece of news. That's an interesting one. Parents queue up for volunteer slots at Mee Toh school. Parents are queuing up to be volunteers. Now, generally, if you want to volunteer, these non-profit organizations will approach you, or the community services will approach you. Hey, would you like to volunteer? You don't really have to queue up to volunteer, but it's strange. Parents have to queue up to volunteer. There were 50 volunteer slots and 80 parents queuing up at a popular school. So what exactly is happening? Now, here's the context in yellow over here. Being a parent volunteer, which requires at least 40 hours spent doing things such as preparing meals or being traffic wardens, gives parents priority in the primary one registration exercise. Now, so that's the reason why some parents are queuing up, fighting for space to be volunteers. Mee Toh had about 50 volunteer places for grabs for parents whose children are starting primary one in 2017. Now, this is a piece of old news, right? 2017, and this piece of news was in 2014. So they were queuing up 3 years before the children were even in primary school. This author made some very funny observations. The queues for Hello Kitty dolls, preschool places, and now for the chance to be a parent volunteer at popular school. Yeah, if you remember, many years ago, we had this incident. People were queuing up for Hello Kitty dolls from McDonald's, and eventually, if I remember correctly, the crowd size, the McDonald's restaurant got so overcrowded that the windows or the glass door was smashed, right? Because there were too many people in there. So this is something that might be somewhat related to what we're going to talk about, but something that's a bit more recent about parenting. Parents camp overnight at Nafa to book classes for their kids. Look at these people, guys. These are parents whose children have been assured of a spot in Nafa class. They went early to snag the class timing, so they already have the classes secured. They just want to make sure they have the best timing available. This was published just less than 2 years ago. Now let's look at what's written here. More than 300 parents spent over 6 hours queuing overnight on Saturday at Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts, Nafa, Bencoolen campus, each prepared with chairs, sleeping bags, yoga mats, and snacks. Look at that. Getting what that timing was important for me, as I had to coordinate my son's timetable between his other enrichment classes and family time, she said. And even though the registration ended at 1 p.m., it took another 2 hours for the crowd to disperse. A crowd of parents, presumably they were trying to appeal. Could you give me like the timing that I want? Miss Bai, who got to register at 10 a.m., said, "I did not bring any snacks, but to me, getting that 11 a.m. slot was more important than how hungry I was." A lot of people say we Singaporeans, we are very kiasu. I think this example is pretty telling. I mean, it's pretty fitting of that of that description. Of course, this applies to some parents. Not all parents do this. I don't know any single one who has been involved in like queues like this. But it is a behavior that is worth noting. You can use this to as an example to showcase behaviors of certain Singaporeans. And now, speaking of kiasuism, how kiasu we are, right? Yeah, kiasu is basically a word for competitive, afraid of losing out. It's similar to FOMO, but it just takes you one step further because you're afraid of even losing out. And FOMO is just afraid of missing out on maybe one or two events. Kiasu is like afraid of losing out in life in general. This is something that has been circulating around the internet at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So I'm sure a lot of you saw images like this. Yeah. So empty shelves. Why? Why were the shelves empty? mainly shelves of toilet papers, pasta, rice, bread. Not too sure what this is. Okay, I believe that's toilet paper. Everything was sold out. The shelves were emptied because people were afraid that if they didn't buy these things, other people will buy them up. Yeah. So in some way, we can argue that there are many people in this society who are unable to see past their own interests. They can only consider their own interests, and they would typically ignore the suffering of others. When you buy up things like this, you're leaving a lot of people with nothing to buy. Okay, you could stock up all the toilet papers at home, but are we really gonna need all of it? So there's something about the psyche of panic buying and selfishness right here. Now, looking at this, I can tell you there's an economic phenomenon actually that which we call the tragedy of the commons, that explains this behavior. I don't think it's all down to selfishness really, but this is really just not down to selfishness or Kiasuism. It's just a very natural human behavior. If you think Singapore is the only country that sees empty shelves like this during COVID, you're wrong, because in many other countries we saw the same thing as well. I believe in the US, I saw this video of two women fighting. They were literally fighting over a packet of tissue. Yeah, I think they were slapping each other. It's insane. But what exactly is happening? We can explain it with human psychology, or in some ways with economics. The tragedy of the commons. What is the tragedy of the commons? I made this part of the title of my video because I want you to understand this topic in depth. The tragedy of the commons is an economics problem in which every individual has an incentive to consume a resource, but at the expense of every other individual. If everybody does act in their own apparent best interest, it results in harmful overconsumption. I can give you a hypothetical scenario. Let's say there's a lake with a lot of fish, or rather a certain number of fish, and 100 fishermen catch fish from this particular lake. Now, to ensure the sustainability of the fish supply in the long term, everyone must make sure they fish at a rate that is slower than, or at least same as the rate at which the fish can reproduce, right? If you fish faster than what the fish can reproduce over time, then we have a problem, because the lake will eventually run out of supply. The lake cannot replenish itself. So it's a very simple problem, right? So generally, rationally speaking, all the fishermen will come to an agreement and say, hey guys, you know what? We should only catch this much fish every day from the lake, no more than that. Would that work? The reality is it does not work that way. Human nature is selfish. We are irrational. Without any kind of regulation, people will just go on to fish as much as possible, because we believe that if we don't catch all these fish soon, like someone else, okay, some people from the 99 other fishermen are gonna do it for us. They're gonna catch all the fish instead, leaving us with no fish. Now, does this sound like the panic buying that you see during at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic? Yeah, it's kind of the same, okay? That's what we refer to as the tragedy of the commons. The only way to solve the tragedy of the commons is if there is some regulation involved. Someone says, no, you can't catch this much. You can't catch from this area. You cannot do this. You cannot do that. For the interest of everyone. Because we human beings are inherently, innately selfish, especially when resources are scarce, like in the case of Singapore. So in Singapore, the government has so little faith in people that they have to take drastic actions to make sure people do not ruin public goods or public resources. They do not overconsume. One of the ways in which we see this happening is through clearing of tables. This scene is pretty common for all of us Singaporeans. Okay, we sit down at the table and we have to wait for the cleaner to come. Can you please help me clean this table? Or sometimes if the cleaner happens to be busy, you have to do it yourself. So that what you value here, okay, when we sit down at a coffee shop, in a food court, at the dining areas, we want a clean table to sit on, right? So a clean table in some way is a public resource, is valuable. But many people, they don't care about it. Okay? After they finish their food, they just leave the dishes behind, and just leave it to whoever. This is not my problem anymore once I've left this place. So in some ways, it is out of selfishness that we do not clear these tables, in some ways at least. So the government says, no, enough is enough. We're going to make sure you clear these tables. It's going to be mandatory for diners to return trays and clear table litter from June 1st. What the Straits Times editor didn't include here is there's a fine involved. Fine of how much? Let's find out. From September 1, enforcement will be taken against those who do not comply with advice to clean up after themselves in public dining places. First-time offenders will be given a written warning. Second-time offenders will face a $300 composition fine, and subsequent offenders may face court fines. You will be fined for not cleaning after yourself, this can go up to $2,000 for the first conviction. So I think the government has so little faith. Like, if I just tell you to clean up, you're not going to do it yourself. Okay, you need me, the government, to force you to enforce this rule and to impose some consequences in order for you to behave in a certain way. So the SFA, the Singapore Food Agency, will work with NEA to roll out the enforcement. Look here, okay, how this came about. I'm sure you have seen the campaigns that I'm going to cover this. NEA said we've been talking about these clean tables since 2013, and there has been a lot of education effort that's been put out over the years. One example is the Clean Tables campaign launched in February this year. Remember that? We see a lot of decals on the tables, and there are a lot of messages telling us, please clean up after yourself, please clean up, but nobody cares. So what happens? The government got fed up. They said, we tried the soft way, didn't work, now we have to try the tough approach. Following that exercise, we've seen a small uptick in terms of tray returns. A small uptick, how many percent? From 33% to 35%. That's almost non-existent. But unfortunately, I don't think that is significant enough. So, so why clearing trays is important? Clearing dirty trays, crockery and table litter will not only protect other diners, but also the cleaners, who are usually the elderly. We urge everyone to work with NEA to take greater ownership of our public dining places and to maintain high hygiene and cleanliness standards. So interesting article. I think it's quite an interesting development how the government has to fine us for everything. So back to the question, are we a selfish lot? In some ways, from the examples I've just shared, right? It looks like yes, we are, but it is not unique to us. Apparently, it's unique. It's innate in human nature. You see this everywhere, like practically everywhere, most places, I would say. But there are also cases in which we can say Singaporeans are not that selfish. We can actually look beyond our self-interests and look at the bigger picture. I'll show you two examples over here. I'm not going to go through these articles, the last two articles, because you can read them in the description below. I'm going to include all these links below for you to read. Singapore sends 2 plane loads of oxygen cylinders to India to aid its COVID-19 response. Straightforward. Those of you who have been through who follows with what's happening in 2021, India was going through a really, really tough time. They ran out of oxygen, so the Singaporean government hospitals actually sent plane loads of oxygen cylinders to India to help them fight the pandemic. And of course, I have another one here: 7 kind acts by Singaporeans during the COVID-19 outbreak. I will just share with you one of these. 7 kind acts. Okay, number 3, solidarity with our international friends. You can't quite read this, but I'll read it out for you, right? Because workers from Malaysia, they cannot get into Singapore. The borders were closed. Now, usually many workers, they will commute in and out of Malaysia into Singapore and back to Malaysia every single day. But once the borders are closed, they can't do that anymore. It's prohibited. So what some people have done, some people, homeowners, they're offering their spaces, their living spaces. Hey, you know what? I know you need a place to stay for the time being, a temporary place to stay. Why don't you take this? So this person, Angela Chan, she said, My renovation works have been temporarily halted for the next 2 weeks due to the Malaysia lockdown. I have 2 bedrooms, completely unfurnished, available with undisrupted electricity, water and heater supply, as the major reno works are being carried out in the kitchen. So the reno works for the bedrooms are done. Now it's only the kitchen that needs to be done. So now the bedrooms are done. She's not gonna move in. She said, "Why don't? Yeah, if you want it, you can have the room. I will not be charging a single cent." Look at that. I will not be charging a single cent. This is nothing compared to our fellow Malaysians sacrificing being with their family for the next 2 weeks to feed their families. On hindsight, we know that this is not just 2 weeks, right? It lasted for years. I mean, a year at least. Let me know if you know anyone who can probably benefit from this, whatever that she's offering. So wonderful stories of how altruistic we can be, and many more that you can read up later on, in the description below. Now, what I want you to do, I have shared with you the articles. I'm gonna put them in the links below. Just check out the description. What you do instead is to look at this AQ. Yochai Benkler believes that humans are capable of cooperation. How far would you agree with his observation relating your arguments to your own society? So cooperation, like on the flip side of the coin, is selfishness. Okay, are we selfish or are we cooperative? And this is the article, the passage that you have. It's not the full passage. I will put the link again down below. Just check it out if you don't have the passage. So write your AQ, try this AQ, write it down in the YouTube comments below. I'll put up several other links of articles for you to read up in order to help you with your application question. So try this and you can see what other people have posted as well. So, all right, thank you. We'll see you next time.